Imagine stepping into a desert night. The sand is cold, the stars spread across the sky like ancient fire, and the wind drags with it whispers of stories too old to belong to any one people. Somewhere between silence and starlight comes a question. What would it mean if humans once carried the throne of God himself? The book of Exodus describes it not as myth, but as command. In the wilderness of Sinai, Moses was instructed to craft an object no eyes had yet seen, the Ark of the Covenant. It was not to be ordinary wood and nails. The material chosen was acacia hard, incorruptible, resistant to decay. But the wood was only the skeleton. The Ark was covered entirely in pure gold, inside and out, a mirror of sunlight and fire. Gold, even now, is more than ornament. It conducts, it channels. Some would later whisper that the Ark was as much machine as relic, that its very skin could carry power. Upon its lid, the mercy seat stood to cherubim of hammered gold, wings stretching toward each other, shadows touching in the space between. That empty space was no emptiness at all. Scripture says it was here, in the silence between wings, that the presence of God would descend. Not symbol, not memory, presence. Inside were placed three things: the tablets of the 10 Commandments, Aaron's rod that had once blossomed with almond flowers, and a golden jar of manna, the bread that fell from heaven. Taken alone, they were relics of memory. Together, they formed covenant. They made the Ark a junction of heaven and earth. But the Ark was not safe. It was not made for casual touch. The story of Uzzah warns us. When the Ark tilted on a cart, he reached to steady it. A simple act of reflex, a human instinct to keep sacred things from falling. And in a heartbeat, he was dead. Not by sword, not by hand, by presence. The Ark carried a power so unyielding that to mishandle it was to collapse beneath it. Carried into battle, the Ark became more than symbol, it was force. Before its golden lid, rivers parted, walls tumbled, and armies faltered. Jericho's walls fell not by siege but by sound, when the Ark circled them and trumpets roared. Wherever it went, victory followed unless it was taken by enemies. When curses and plagues swiftly spread through foreign lands, this is where ancient narrative brushes against modern imagination. Engineers and physicists have studied the descriptions. Gold as conductor, wood as insulator, winged figures as electrodes. Was the Ark a kind of capacitor? A divine engine storing unimaginable energy? Could radiation explain why those who touched it died? Perhaps it was only belief. Perhaps it was something more. Close your eyes and imagine. You are a soldier in the army of Israel. The desert sun blazes above you. Dust burns in your lungs. Before you, priests bear the Ark, its gold dazzling, almost painful to behold. Trumpets echo. The ground trembles. And then walls crumble, stones shatter, and enemies scatter before a force you cannot see. Would you not believe the hand of heaven was stretched over you? The Ark was weapon, yes, but it was also throne. It traveled with the people like a sovereign maid, visible. In the tabernacle, it rested behind veils, within the Holy of Holies, guarded by ritual and fear. Only once a year, on the Day of Atonement, did the high priest dare step inside, blood in hand, trembling, to face the silent golden seat. That was its essence, awe and terror bound together, a box, yet a mystery, a thing carried on shoulders, yet said to carry the weight of eternity. It was not built for beauty, alone it was made to command. It made kings, it made nations. Whoever held the Ark did not merely hold a relic, they held legitimacy, terror, and the right to rule in God's name. And here lies the haunting question. What happens when such a thing disappears? If a throne vanishes, does the crown vanish with Itor? Does the shadow of its power continue to govern in secret hands? The Chronicles of Israel tell us that the ark was there, and then it was not. Gone from the temple, absent from the records of Babylon, lost or hidden. Some claim it was carried into exile, others that it was sealed beneath stone, still others that it crossed the seas to faraway kingdoms. But all these stories begin with one fact. The ark was unlike anything else. Not a vessel of wood and gold, but a throne of fire. And perhaps, even now, its silence is more dangerous than its presence. For in silence, legends grow. In silence, power lingers. And somewhere, waiting in shadow, there are those who claim to have found it. The ark was once the heartbeat of a nation. In the first temple, built by King Solomon, it was said to rest at the very center, in the chamber so holy that even priests feared to breathe too loudly. Smoke from sacrifices drifted upward, chants echoed in the courts, but behind the veil, unseen, sat the golden throne of fire. For centuries, it symbolized not only God's presence, but the very identity of Israel, and then Solomon. In 586 BC, Jerusalem fell. The armies of Babylon stormed its walls, fire swept through the temple, and treasures were carried away. Gold, silver, sacred vessels listed carefully in the Book of Kings. But one thing is missing. No mention of the ark, not a word. How could the most sacred object in Israel vanish without record? Some imagine it smashed, melted into bullion for Babylon's coffers. But this explanation rings hollow. To destroy the ark was not merely to seize wealth, it was to claim mastery over Israel as God. Yet Babylonian records, proud of their victories, make no boast of such a prize. Silence again. Others point to the prophet Jeremiah. Ancient writings hint that, foreseeing destruction, he carried the ark away. Where? To Mount Nebo, overlooking the promised land. There, hidden in caves, it would await the time of restoration. Even centuries later, rabbis whispered that the ark still lies buried beneath those stony ridges, untouched, beyond the grasp of empires. Still others tell a different tale, that priests smuggled the ark out of Jerusalem entirely. Some say to Egypt, guarded in the shadows of the Nile. Some to Ethiopia, where legends claim it rests in Axum, under the care of guardians who never leave their post. Each version insists on one thing. The ark was too dangerous, too holy, to be left to Babylon. But perhaps the strangest silence comes from within Scripture itself. In the Second Temple, rebuilt after exile, the rituals continued. Sacrifices were offered, incense burned, songs rose once more in the courts of Zion. Yet the ark is never mentioned as present. The Holy of Holies stood empty. Imagine it, a room built for a throne with no king, a sanctuary waiting for a presence that never returned. And yet the worship went on. For centuries, Israel prayed to a God whose seat was missing. Did the absence weaken faith or deepen it? Did it make the people desperate to recover what was lost, or resigned to serve in shadows? What if that emptiness was intentional? What if the ark was never meant to remain forever in one place, but to vanish, to become myth, to stir hunger in generations to come? Consider the psychological power of disappearance. A relic on display commands reverence, but a relic unseen commands imagination. The ark's silence gave it new life, not as object, but as mystery. No longer a box in a temple, it became a ghost wandering through time, haunting kings and popes, soldiers and seekers. And so, a question lingered in the ruins of Jerusalem. Who, if anyone, held the ark's secret? Was it buried by prophets, carried by priests, or quietly claimed by powers who would one day rise to shape the medieval world? Centuries later, when armored riders bearing a red cross appeared in the Holy Land, some whispered that they searched not for glory, but for something older, something hidden, something that Babylon never found, yet might still lie beneath the stones of the Temple Mount. The Ark had vanished from history, but the silence it left behind was fertile ground for legends. Legends that would not only echo in dusty scrolls, but explode into power plays between kings, churches, and secret orders. For what vanished in Jerusalem may have reappeared transformed in the hands of men who understood that the greatest treasure is not gold, but belief. After the fires of Babylon faded and the exiles returned, Jerusalem rose again. The second temple was built upon the ruins of the first. Its courts once more filled with pilgrims, its altars smoked with sacrifice, its songs lifted into the dry air of Judea. Yet something essential was missing. Behind the veil, in the most holy place, there was no ark. Imagine that chamber, stone walls gleaming with fresh plaster, incense swirling in the lamplight, silence pressing like a weight. At its center, where once the golden throne of fire had stood, there was only emptiness, a throne room with no throne. The rituals continued. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest still entered, carrying the blood of sacrifice, but instead of sprinkling it on the mercy seat of the ark, he sprinkled it on bare rock. The gesture remained, but the object was gone. What was once a covenant alive with presence became a shadow play of memory. This silence was louder than words. It was as though God's seat had been removed, leaving his people to worship absence itself. How does a nation carry on when its symbol of divine nearness has disappeared? Some believed it would one day be restored, descending in glory when the Messiah came. Others feared it was gone forever, a judgment too heavy to undo. But perhaps silence has a strange power of its own. A visible ark could be revered or desecrated. An absent ark could only be imagined. An imagination is more enduring than gold. In the centuries that followed, stories sprouted like roots in darkness. Rabbis whispered of secret caves sealed by prophets. Travelers claimed to know guardians who watched over it far away. Some even argued that the Ark's very disappearance was part of its purpose, that God had hidden it until the appointed time. Meanwhile, empires rose and fell around the empty temple. The Persians allowed worship to continue, the Greeks desecrated it, the Romans loomed over it with iron legions. Yet through every conquest, the Ark remained unspoken, unmentioned, unseen. Silence wrapped it like a second veil, and silence breeds longing. Each generation looked at the vacant Holy of Holies and felt the ache of absence. Each festival reminded them of what had been lost. The Ark was no longer an object, they had none to see but a question. Where is it? Who holds it? Will it return? Such questions are fertile soil for myths, and myths, in turn, are fertile soil for power. For whoever could claim knowledge of the Ark, whether true or not, might command the imagination of nations. So by the time Crusaders marched eastward in the Middle Ages, the ground was already prepared. Legends of the lost Ark had smoldered for centuries, waiting for armored men with holy banners to fan them into flame. The storm of Babylon had passed. The temple stood again, but hollow. And it was in that hollow silence, that void at the center of Israel's worship, that the Ark became something more than artifact. It became mystery itself, a silence after the storm that refused to fade, going across centuries, drawing seekers ever closer to the mount where it once rested. Far from Jerusalem, beyond deserts and seas, another story was taking shape. In the highlands of Ethiopia, where mountains pierce the clouds and ancient churches cling to rock like nests of stone, whispers claimed that the Ark of the Covenant had never been lost at all. It had simply traveled. Here, the Ark is not a rumor, it is a certainty. Every Ethiopian child grows up hearing that the Ark rests in Axum, inside a modest chapel near the ruins of an older empire. Locals call it Tabat, the Holy Chest. Priests say it was carried across deserts long before Babylon's armies came. Some trace it back to the Queen of Sheba, who visited Solomon in Jerusalem. Their child, Menelik, returned to Ethiopia not alone, but with the Ark itself. The Kebra Nagast, a medieval Ethiopian text, tells the tale in sweeping detail. It says the Ark was stolen or perhaps gifted by Solomon to his son. With priests and guardians, Menelik carried it southward, across the Nile, to a land that would become Ethiopia. And there it has remained, through centuries of kings and conquests, hidden not by absence, but by guardianship. Even today, one man is appointed as keeper of the Ark in Axum. His life is bound to it. He never leaves the chapel grounds. He never marries, never wanders, never abandons his post. Day and night he watches. No photographs, no visitors, no proof, only faith. And yet, faith has power. For two Ethiopians, the Ark is not lost. It is here, guarded by shadows, unbroken in lineage. But Ethiopia's claim stretches further. Every church in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition houses a replica, a tablet said to carry the Ark's sanctity in miniature. During festivals, these tablets are carried in procession under embroidered umbrellas, wrapped in cloth, never exposed to open eyes. To an outsider, they may seem symbolic, but to the faithful, they are radiant extensions of the true Ark, sleeping in Axum. Still, the mystery deepens. Why, if the Ark is in Ethiopia, has the world not seen it? Why not reveal it, silence debate, and prove the legend true? Perhaps because mystery itself is more powerful than proof. A revealed Ark would be inspected, doubted, measured by scientists and skeptics. A hidden Ark can live forever in the realm of the sacred. Travelers across the centuries, Jesuits, explorers, even modern journalists have pressed close to the chapel of Axum. None have entered. All have left with only silence. And silence, once again, is its own testimony. Could it be that Ethiopia holds the last thread of continuity? That while Jerusalem's temple was emptied, this mountain kingdom became the new throne room of God's covenant? Or is it, like so many other legends, a brilliant tale woven into national identity, no less powerful for being unprovable? What makes Ethiopia's story unique is not whether the Ark rests in Axum, but how deeply that belief shapes reality. Kings were crowned in its shadow. Wars were fought under its blessing. To doubt it is, in some sense, to doubt Ethiopia itself. And so, across centuries, the Ark's silence took one form in Jerusalem, an empty room, and another form in Ethiopia, guarded treasure no one may see. Two silences, two mysteries, both feeding the hunger of those who searched. When the Crusaders and later the Templars heard whispers of Axum, did they believe? Did they send envoys, or dream of recovering what had been carried across deserts? Or did they suspect that Ethiopia's Ark was not the Ark, but a copy, a diversion, one more veil hiding the true throne of fire? History does not answer. But one thing is certain. Ethiopia's claim ensures that the Ark is never simply gone. It is always somewhere, always waiting, always alive in the imagination of those willing to believe. And belief, as the Templars would one day understand, is itself a form of power. The year was 1099. Jerusalem had fallen into Crusader hands, its streets echoing with hymns and steel, its stones blackened by blood and fire. Pilgrims flooded to the Holy Land, clutching relics, prayers, and hope. Yet the city was not safe. Roads swarmed with bandits, and the journey to sacred shrines could be fatal. It was in this climate that 9 men appeared poor knights, so the chronicles say. They were not lords with armies, nor princes with gold. They were simple warriors, bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They came to serve, to protect pilgrims, but from the beginning, their story bent toward silence and shadow. For these knights were given quarters on the Temple Mount itself, in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which Crusaders believed to stand upon the ruins of Solomon's Temple. Imagine it, the very ground where the Ark had once rested, now home to a handful of mysterious warriors. 9 years they dwelt there, rarely seen, rarely heard from, conducting no battles of note, gathering no wealth. To the outside world, they seemed almost invisible. 9 years, and then, suddenly, everything changed. The Pope himself recognized them, granting privileges no order had ever known. Donations poured in, lands were given, noble sons joined their ranks. Within decades, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, known to us as the Knights Templar, became the most powerful military order in Christendom, from obscurity to prominence, from poverty to wealth. What had happened in those 9 silent years? Some say they spent their time patrolling roads, fulfilling their vows. But others whisper of something deeper, that the knights were not merely guarding pilgrims, they were searching. Beneath the Temple Mount lies a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, carved in ages long forgotten. Local legend spoke of hidden vaults, sealed passages, lost treasures of Solomon's Temple. Archaeologists centuries later would confirm the existence of strange, ancient tunnels. Did the Templars discover them? Did they dig deeper, guided by texts or maps preserved in secret? If they found nothing, why did their fortunes turn so suddenly? If they found something, what could it have been? Some believe they unearthed relics, sacred vessels, priestly garments, perhaps even fragments of Solomon's wisdom. Others go further, daring to ask if they touched the unthinkably, if they found the Ark itself, resting in silence beneath the very stones where it once stood. Imagine the scene, in torchlight, deep underground. 9 knights brush away centuries of dust. Their hands tremble as golden edges emerge from the dark. They feel heat rising from the object, hear a low hum as if air itself is alive. They exchange glances. What they have uncovered is not merely treasure. It is power raw, untouchable, divine. Whether legend or truth, from that moment on, the Templars were never the same. They seemed to act with knowledge others did not share, with confidence that no pope or king could fully restrain. They were poor no longer. They were guardians of a secret that elevated them above thrones and crowns. Of course, history leaves no written confession. The chronicles say only that 9 knights lived in silence and emerged as giants. Yet silence itself can speak. And in that silence lies the possibility that the Ark of the Covenant, vanished from Jerusalem centuries before, had returned. Not to Israel, not to Ethiopia, but to the hands of men who would reshape Europe under its shadow. From the mount where the Ark once sat, the Templars rose, and whether by discovery or by rumor, they carried with them a weapon even greater than steel. The belief that they had touched the throne of God. Beneath the Temple Mount, silence breathes. The stones above are layered with centuries of conquest. Babylonian, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic. Crusader yet beneath, the earth keeps secrets no army ever claimed. Whispers tell of tunnels, chambers, and vaults carved into the bedrock, hidden long before the first Crusader sword pierced Jerusalem's sky. In later centuries, explorers would crawl into these narrow passages. English officers, Ottoman diggers, even modern archaeologists. They mapped cisterns, shafts, stairways leading nowhere. Some tunnels were ancient water channels. Others seemed purposeless, too carefully shaped to be random. A puzzle half buried in darkness. And it was here, so the stories say, that the first Templars descended. For 9 years, they were not seen guarding the pilgrim roads. Instead, their true work unfolded beneath stone and silence. Did they dig by torchlight, guided by local rumor or by texts smuggled from the east? Did they follow maps whispered to them by Jewish mystics or Eastern Christians who still remembered the Temple's foundations? The chronicles do not say, but in the 19th century, when British officer Charles Warren mapped the Mount's underworld, he found ancient shafts that reached terrifying depths and chambers sealed long before his time. His reports hinted that someone, centuries earlier, had already been there. The soil had been disturbed, tunnels widened, passages forced open. Whose hands had done this? Warren could not answer. The whispers grow louder. It was the Templars. What might they have sought? Some imagined treasure gold vessels, wealth beyond measure. But the Ark was never about gold. The Ark was power, covenant, and danger. To touch it unprepared was to die. To guard it was to hold the throne of God. Picture the scene. A narrow tunnel, sweat dripping from the brows of armored monks. Their spades strike stone. Dust fills the air. Then a hollow sounder cavity, a chamber sealed for centuries. Hearts race, torches flicker. And within that chamber, perhaps not the Ark itself, but signs, inscriptions, relics, scrolls that spoke of its last resting place. Even a fragment of such knowledge would have been enough to alter the Order's destiny. For what is more valuable than gold? Knowledge. And the Templars, if they found even the echo of the Ark, became custodians of a secret capable of unseating kings and popes alike. Later, writers, esoteric chroniclers, centuries removed would hint that the knights descended into the earth and returned with more than they carried down. Skeptics dismiss this as fantasy. Yet when the silence of history aligns with sudden, inexplicable transformation, suspicion blooms. Their rise was too sharp, too sudden. 9 obscure men entered stone halls. An empire of knights emerged. And so the Temple Mount remains both cradle and crypt. A place where belief says something was hidden, where archaeology admits something lies beneath, and where silence refuses to yield its truth. If the Ark was not found, perhaps a map to it was, if not a map, then a clue. If not a clue, then at least the conviction that such a relic still existed. And conviction, in the hands of men who understood silence as power, was enough. The stones of Jerusalem whisper still, and sometimes, if you listen closely, you hear not just history but the sound of shovels in the dark. In the ancient world, kings were not crowned by bloodline alone. They were crowned by presence, by the relic that made their reign more than political, more than earthly. For Israel, that relic was the Ark of the Covenant. When David conquered Jerusalem, he did not claim it as his capital until the Ark was carried through its gates. Without it, he was a warlord. With it, he was God's anointed. Solomon built the first temple not to glorify stone, but to enshrine the Ark, the throne of the invisible king. The covenant was not a metaphor, it was a seat, a footstool, a place where heaven met earth. Centuries later, when the Ark vanished, so too did that direct line between throne and divinity. Priests filled the void with ritual. Kings filled it with conquest. Yet the hunger remained. Whoever controlled the Arcor even whispered of it held a weapon beyond armies. And this hunger did not die with Babylon. It slumbered, waiting for the age of knights. The medieval world was fractured kingdoms bickering, popes quarreling, legitimacy forever in doubt. In such a world, relics were not decoration. They were anchors. The bones of saints, fragments of the true cross. Even drops of the Virgin's milk-all were guarded, paraded, and invoked as proof that God smiled upon one ruler more than another. But above them all, one relic was whispered, feared, and longed for. The Ark. Imagine, then, the Knights Templar, poor, no longer, secretive, independent, powerful. Imagine what kings would think if they suspected these knights carried not merely swords, but a throne once said to kill armies and crown monarchs. Did the Templars wield this openly? No, they were too clever for that. Power displayed is power threatened. Power suggested is power eternal. And so, the Arcor, the belief in it became their invisible crown. They did not need to show it. They needed only to guard silence, to hint at secrets too dangerous to name. Kings bent the knee not out of fear of armies, but out of fear of what relics the order might conceal. Some chroniclers whisper of sudden conversions, monarchs who shifted alliances after private meetings with Templar envoys. Others hint at sealed chambers within commanderies, rooms entered only by the inner circle, where relics rested beneath veils. No proof survives. Perhaps that is the point. But the effect was visible. Rulers treated these knights not as servants, but as peers. They became kingmakers, financiers, advisors, guardians of thrones. At times, they seemed above thrones altogether. The Vatican too must have noticed. For what is the Church if not the guardian of relics? Its authority rested on Peter's bones, Christ's cross, Rome's shrines. And yet, the possibility that a rival order possessed the Ark, the relic of relics, was a threat no pope could easily endure. This may explain the quiet unease that shadowed the Templars long before their sudden fall. Their independence was tolerated, but their silence was not. Silence, after all, can be more dangerous than speech. So we arrive at the central paradox. If the Ark was indeed found, or even if it was only rumored, then it did not simply belong to the Templars. It crowned them, not as kings, not as popes, but as something far more dangerous. Guardians of a covenant older than the Church itself, and in a world ruled by relics that made them untouchable. They began with nothing. 9 poor knights, sharing horses, eating from borrowed tables, clad in patched armor. They had no lands, no legacy, no treasury to fund their vows. In a world where orders were built on noble patronage, they were a footnote, a curiosity at best. And then, without warning, they were something else entirely. Within 2 decades, the Knights Templar transformed from obscurity into one of the most formidable institutions in Christendom. Castles rose in their name. Kings granted them exemptions from taxes. Nobles handed over estates. Pilgrims entrusted them with fortunes. The Pope himself issued a bull declaring they answered to no authority but Roman sometimes. They acted as if even Rome was not enough. How does a brotherhood of 9 leap to command thousands, spanning Europe and the Holy Land, in so little time? How does poverty erupt into wealth, silence into influence, invisibility into fear? The chronicles say little, and what they do say is strangely quiet. No grand victories mark their beginning. No miracle is recorded to explain their favor. The sudden rise is a gap in history, silence shaped like a question. Some whisper that their power flowed from the sword. Brave warriors, disciplined, fearless in battle. And indeed, the Templars fought with skill that earned respect. But courage alone does not crown bankers of kings. Others claim they filled a need. A military order to guard Christendom's frontier. A spiritual cause in a violent world. Perhaps true, yet other orders tried, and none rose so swiftly. So we return to the whispers beneath stone, to those 9 years of silence on the Temple Mount, to the possibility that they unearthed something or claimed to. For what could explain their sudden leap? A chest, a scroll, a relic, or even a rumor. If they had touched the Ark, if they had found proof it existed, their fortunes would not need armies. They would need only silence. Silence wrapped around a whisper so powerful that kings themselves leaned in to listen. By 1129, the Council of Trove formally recognized the Templars. But recognition does not explain reverence. They were not merely accepted, they were celebrated. Nobles emptied coffers into their hands. Merchants entrusted them with trade. Pilgrims handed them lives and legacies, as if the knights carried more than swords as. If they carried certainty, what kind of certainty? The kind that says, we guard something you will never touch, but must always fear. Historians point to strategy, timing, clever leadership. Yet strategy does not explain how an order with no crown could make monarchs bow. Timing does not explain the awe they inspired in an age accustomed to blood. Leadership does not explain the silence always, the silence that surrounded their most sacred places. The leap remains too sharp, too sudden, too unexplained. So the legend grows, that their rise was not of this world, that beneath the Temple Mount they found something which transformed them from servants into masters, from knights into guardians of a covenant older than the Church. Whether relic or rumor, treasure or terror, one truth persists. The Templars rose not gradually, but as if pulled upward by an invisible crown. And in that meteoric rise lay the seed of their downfall. For power born in silence is power others cannot abide. When words fail, stone remembers. The Templars left few writings, no grand chronicles, no confessions of what they believed, no open record of what they may have found beneath the Temple Mount. Their archives, if they existed, vanished with them, but stone endures. And if you step into their churches, their commanderies, their fortresses, you begin to sense that silence was not emptiness. It was design, unlike the soaring cathedrals of Gothic Europe spires, clawing toward heaven. Stained glass, blazing with saints, the Templar churches often chose another shape, circles. Not metaphorical, not symbolic alone, but literal architecture. Round naves echoing the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, itself echoing something older still, the circular sanctuaries of the ancient world. Why a circle? Because a circle has no beginning and no end. It reflects eternity. It recalls the sacred center. And at the heart of that center, in the memory of Israel, sat the Ark, the footstool of God, the throne in shadow. Some Templar sites go further. At Tomar in Portugal, the rotunda is carved with such geometric precision that light falls in patterns at solstices and equinoxes, like a secret calendar of stone. In Roslin Chapel, long after the Templars fell, symbols echo their legacy. Twin knights on a single horse, vines twined in Kabbalistic knots, angels bending over rectangular chests that look strangely familiar. Coincidence, some say. Decoration, others insist, yet repetition whispers otherwise. Look closely, and you find patterns. Two winged figures bending over a box, cherubim facing inward. A cube encircled by fire, carved into stained glass. Twin pillars at church entrances, recalling Boaz and Yakin of Solomon's temple. Compass-like floor plans, orienting sacred space not just toward heaven, but toward memory. It is as if the ark, lost in time, was never absent at all. It was written into geometry, into sunlight striking an altar, into the shadow cast by a column at noon. The ark became presence through absence encoded, not displayed. Why such secrecy? Perhaps the Templars feared what discovery might bring. Or perhaps they believed the ark was not meant to be guarded in vaults, but in knowledge. A relic of silence, hidden not in wood and gold, but in ratios and stone. One chronicler hints at this in passing, that the knights guarded a throne not with swords, but with measure. It is a strange phrase, easily dismissed. Yet walk into their spaces, and the phrase becomes clearer. The Templars built not just fortresses, they built diagrams, maps of silence, stones that speak only to those who listen. Imagine standing in a Templar chapel at dawn. The air is cold, the floor worn by centuries of feet. Light slips through a narrow slit of a window, and in that light, a shadow falls perfectly between two carved wings on the altar. A golden box may not be there, but its memory has been preserved in the rhythm of sun and stone. Perhaps this was their intention, to preserve the covenant not in possession, but in architecture, to guard not the object, but the idea, to ensure that long after their order was shattered, the silence would remain etched into walls, encoded in geometry, waiting for the patient and the curious. The Templars may have carried secrets in silence, but their stones still whisper, and those whispers suggest that whether or not they found the ark, they remembered it so deeply that they built their churches as echoes of the throne no eye was meant to see. Far from Europe's stone chapels and fortress walls, another current of the ark's story runs deep southward into Africa's highlands, where mountains rise like teeth against the sky. Here, in Ethiopia, the ark is not myth, it is presence. For centuries, Ethiopians have believed without hesitation that the Ark of the Covenant rests in Axum, the ancient capital of their kingdom. Not a rumor in books, not a symbol carved in stone, but a living relic kept within a modest chapel beside the ruins of older churches. They call it Tabot. They do not debate its existence. They guard it. The story is told in the Kebra Nagast, the national epic of Ethiopia. It claims that when the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon, their union produced a son Menelik. When grown, Menelik traveled to Jerusalem. But when he returned to Ethiopia, he carried with him something far greater than royal blessing. He carried the ark. Some say it was stolen. Others, that Solomon himself gave it willingly, foreseeing Jerusalem's destruction. Either way, the tale insists that from that moment, the ark's true throne was no longer in Israel, but in Africa. The claim is not silent ritual, it permeates Ethiopian life. Every Orthodox church in the country houses a tablet, a replica of the ark, kept wrapped in cloth, hidden from eyes. During holy festivals, these tablets are carried in procession under embroidered umbrellas, surrounded by priests in white robes, drums pounding, incense rising. To outsiders, it may appear symbolic. To Ethiopians, it is sacrament. At the center of it all lies the original, in Axum, watched by a single guardian. His life is bound to the ark. He does not leave the chapel. He does not marry. He does not step beyond the shadow of the relic he guards until death. Another guardian is chosen, and the chain continues. Travelers have come, Jesuits, scholars, journalists. None have been allowed to see inside. No photograph exists, no measurement, no proof, and yet absence is its own power. The less revealed, the more sacred it becomes. If the Ark is truly there, what does that mean? It would mean that while Jerusalem wept, while Babylon carried away its treasures, while Rome desecrated the temple, the covenant itself escaped hidden in a kingdom that no empire could fully conquer. If it is not there, what then? It means Ethiopia has preserved, through centuries of faith, something just as powerful: certainty. A belief so deeply rooted that it shapes crowns, coronations, wars, and worship. The Ark, whether real or replica, is inseparable from Ethiopia's identity. This posed a riddle for outsiders. Crusaders heard rumors of it. Later, Templars may have sought contact with Axum, wondering if the throne of fire rested not beneath the mount in Jerusalem, but in a land beyond deserts and seas. Did they send envoys? Did whispers of Ethiopia influence their own secret rites? History does not tell us, but silence itself suggests possibility. Even today, the chapel of Axum remains closed. One man guards, pilgrims wait outside. The world debates, yet the Ark, if it exists, does not speak. Its power is not in what it reveals, but in what it withholds. And so Ethiopia stands as a mirror to Jerusalem. One city with an empty Holy of Holies, another with a sealed sanctuary. Both thrones defined not by sight, but by silence. The Ark's shadow lingers in Axum. Whether true or legend, its presence there has ensured that the covenant has never been entirely absent from history. It is always somewhere waiting, watching, haunting. And if the Templars ever gazed southward, perhaps they understood. The Ark's greatest power was not in gold or wood, but in belief strong enough to build nations. The year was 1314. Scotland groaned under the weight of English rule. Its fields scarred by years of war, its people pressed by the iron hand of Edward II. On the eve of midsummer, near a small stream called Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce faced the greatest gamble of his life. His army was outnumbered, his men weary, the crown he wore balanced on a knife's edge. And yet, history tells us, Scotland triumphed. The English fled in chaos, their knights broken, their king humiliated. It was a victory so improbable, so sudden, that legend rushed to fill the silence left by fact. Among those legends, one shadow stands apart: the Knights Templar. 7 years earlier, in 1307, the Templar order had been shattered in France. King Philip IV, in alliance with Pope Clement, accused them of heresy, seized their wealth, and scattered their brethren. Many were arrested, tortured, burned, but others vanished. Ships slipped out of harbors. Men disappeared into forests. Rumors spread that the order had not died, but gone underground. Where could they find refuge? Some whispered, Scotland. Scotland, excommunicated at the time, lay beyond papal reach. Its king, Robert the Bruce, had been declared an outlaw by Rome. To shelter fugitives was no crime when one was already condemned. And so the tale grew, that Templar knights, fleeing persecution, crossed the sea to Scotland, carrying with them their secrets, their symbols, and perhaps even relics too dangerous to leave behind. At Bannockburn, as the battle turned, witnesses later claimed to see armored horsemen ride into the fray. They bore no banners of clan or crown, only plain surcoats, white against the dust. Their charge split the English lines, scattering cavalry as if struck by fear itself. Some swore these were the Bruce's men. Others whispered, no, they were the Templars. Guardians returned from shadow, fighting for a king who offered them sanctuary. History does not confirm it. Chronicles mention no such riders, but silence, as always, is fertile. And in that silence, the myth of the Templars in Scotland was born. The echoes of this legend did not fade. In the 15th century, Roslin Chapel rose near Edinburgh, carved with mysteries, vines twisted into Kabbalistic knots, angels bowing over boxes, pillars said to mirror Solomon's temple. The chapel became a sanctuary of whispers proof. Some believed that the Templars had indeed taken root in Scotland, guarding secrets older than the kingdom itself. And so, Bannockburn became more than a battle. It became a threshold. On one side, Scotland's freedom, on the other, the survival of the Templars. And between them, perhaps, the faint outline of the Ark's shadow carried into the clash of nations, its silence breaking armies as it had once broken walls. Was it the Ark itself that rode at Bannockburn, or only men who claimed its guardianship? The question cannot be answered, but what matters is not proof, it is presence. For in the legend, Scotland's victory was crowned not only by the courage of its men, but by the silent alliance of an order thought destroyed, an order whose relics might still whisper beneath stone. So Bannockburn remains haunted, a battlefield where history bends, where shadow knights ride forever in the imagination, where freedom and secrecy entwine. And if the Ark was never there, perhaps it did not need to be, for its greatest power has always been this: to appear where silence reigns, to crown those who believe, and to ride unseen at the turning points of history. The Templars died in France, or so the chronicles say. Their Grand Master burned in Paris, their treasures seized, their brothers scattered. Kings declared them heretics, the Pope condemned them, Europe turned its face away. But in Portugal, the story bent in another direction. Here, the Templars did not vanish, they transformed. In 1319, King Denis of Portugal petitioned the Pope for permission to create a new order. Officially, it was not the Templars. Officially, it bore a different name: the Order of Christ. Its emblem was not the simple red cross of the temple, but a cross with flared arms, bright against white sails. And yet, look closer. The knights who filled its ranks were the same men who had once borne the temple's seal. Their lands, confiscated elsewhere, were restored here. Their fortresses, such as Tomar, became their strongholds again. Their vows remained unchanged. Their silence remained unbroken. The Templars had not been destroyed. They had been reborn. Tomar stands as their monument. The convent of Christ rises above the Portuguese hills, its round church echoing the design of Jerusalem's Holy Sepulchre. Carvings coil along its arches, symbols of knights and angels, ships and vines, geometry and mystery. Within its walls, whispers linger that the Ark, or at least its memory, was kept safe, hidden in silence, guiding the Order's rebirth. From Tomar, the Order looked outward. Portugal's kings embraced them, not only as monks or warriors, but as navigators. By the 15th century, under Prince Henry the Navigator, their ships sailed southward along Africa, then westward into the Atlantic. On their sails burned the cross of the Order of Christ, the same cross, reborn, that once marked the shields of Templars. And here, speculation deepens. Why did these voyages begin in Portugal, under the banner of a reborn temple? Why did their ships sail not only for trade, but for secret-seeking lands spoken of in whispers, rivers flowing from Eden, kingdoms guarding relics too ancient to name? Some suggest they sailed toward Ethiopia, drawn by legends of Axum and the Ark guarded there. Others imagine they sailed west, beyond the horizon, searching for lands where silence might conceal treasures the old world could not bear to see. The red cross on their sails was more than symbol. It was a declaration. The guardians had not vanished. They were moving. The Vatican tolerated this transformation, perhaps preferring to let the Templars live on in another guise than to risk open defiance. But silence does not mean ignorance. Rome must have known. Kings must have wondered. Yet Portugal, small and distant, was allowed to keep what others had burned. Why? Because the ark, whether physical or symbolic, was safer hidden in ships than in vaults. Safer in silence than in spectacle. Picture it, a Portuguese carrack rocking on the Atlantic waves. The crew whispers prayers as the sun sinks. In the captain's cabin, a chest rests beneath veils, guarded by men who say little. They are not merchants, not sailors alone. They are brothers of an order reborn, carrying with them something more precious than spices or gold. Whether chest, relic, or only the weight of legend, it is enough. Enough to crown their voyages with mystery. Enough to turn discovery into destiny. Thus, the Templars did not die. They changed banners, shifted names, set sail. Their silence spread across oceans, written in stone at Tomar, unfurled in crimson on sails. And wherever they went, whispers followed, that the throne of fire still moved with them, unseen, untouchable, yet always present. In the autumn of 1307, when the Order of the Temple was struck down in France, something curious was whispered in the ports of La Rochelle. On that night of sudden arrests, when knights were seized in their beds and treasuries confiscated, a fleet of Templar ships vanished. No record shows them captured. No inventory lists their cargo. They simply disappeared. Where did they go? Some say they scattered into friendly harbors along the Mediterranean. Others claim they sailed north to Scotland, carrying fugitives to a land beyond papal reach. But there is another possibility, more daring, more haunting, that the ships sailed west, beyond the horizon, into waters Europeans officially did not yet know. The Atlantic, in the 14th century, was more myth than map. Mariners spoke of islands half seen in fog, of lost lands rising and sinking with the tide, of seas that swallowed men whole. And yet, long before Columbus, Norsemen had touched North America. Sailors from Bristol whispered of cod fisheries across the sea. Legends of Antillia, Hybrazil, and Avalon floated in tavern talk. The ocean was unknown, yes, but not unimaginable. If anyone had the courage to attempt it, it was the Templars. Sailors with ships, fugitives with nothing to lose, guardians perhaps carrying something too precious to let fall into the hands of king or pope. Centuries later, on a rocky island off Nova Scotia, a strange discovery stirred memory. Oak Island, they call it, a place riddled with shafts, flood tunnels, and traps carved deep into the earth. For 200 years, treasure hunters have dug there, finding fragments of parchment, links of chain, and coconut fibers from faraway shores. Who built such a labyrinth? Who buried wealth with such cunning defenses? Some point to pirates, others to Spanish gold, but a persistent whisper remains. It was the Templars, hiding not silver or coin, but something older, perhaps the Ark itself. Imagine it, a chest lowered into the earth, seawater traps sealed above it, markers hidden in stones carved with strange symbols. The treasure is not meant to be found. It is meant to be remembered forever, a question, never an answer. Other clues ripple across the New World. Carvings of crosses in New England rocks. Legends among native tribes of pale-skinned strangers who came before Columbus. maps hinting at coastlines drawn too accurately for the time. None are conclusive. All are suggestive. And suggestion is the currency of mystery. Did the Templars cross the Atlantic? Did they bury their secrets in a new world, free from kings, popes, and inquisitors? If so, then the Ark's trail did not end in Jerusalem, nor in Ethiopia, nor in Portugal, but in silence beneath North American soil. Perhaps this is why the Ark has never been recovered. Perhaps it was never meant to return. Perhaps it was meant to vanish across the ocean, to become part of a continent's hidden memory. For legends do not need proof, they need only possibility. And across the Atlantic, possibility stretches like an endless horizon. So the trail continues, not in documents, not in treasure chests cracked open, but in whispers of ships that slipped away, in shafts that collapse when dug too deep, in crosses carved where no cross should be. The Atlantic swallows many things, but it does not swallow silence. And silence, once more, points to the Ark. By the late Middle Ages, a new legend rose across Europe. It spoke not of a golden chest borne on poles, but of a cup simple, radiant, eternal, the Holy Grail. Poets sang of it. Troubadours wove it into romances of Arthur and his knights. Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote of Parsifal, whose quest for the Grail echoed quests far older. Some said it was the chalice of the Last Supper. Others claimed it caught Christ's blood at the crucifixion. To seek it was to seek the heart of God. But why, after centuries of silence about the Ark, did Europe's imagination turn so suddenly to another relic? Was it invention or substitution? The Grail, unlike the Ark, was fluid. It could be a chalice, a stone, even a book. Its meaning was layered, its form shifting. And in that ambiguity lay its power. A relic too dangerous to name directly could be veiled, transformed, sung about in the language of romance. Some whisper that the Grail was never a cup at all, that it was a cipher for the Ark, reborn in story so it might live without being exposed. To speak of the Ark was heresy. To sing of the Grail was poetry. The Templars appear in these stories, too. In some versions, the Grail is guarded by Templars, Knights of the Temple, who keep it hidden in mountain strongholds. Coincidence or a careful disguise? If the Ark was truly gone, the Grail filled the absence with longing. If the Ark still existed, the Grail was its mask. Either way, the hunger was the same, a relic that could crown kings, heal lands, bring heaven to earth. And what better camouflage for the greatest secret of Christendom than a story that could be told at courts, in chapels, by firelight passed on, reshaped, never proven, never denied. Consider how the Grail differs from other relics. Bones can be weighed, wood can be measured, cloth can be tested, but a cup that shifts form, a relic always beyond reach, this is not evidence, it is narrative, and narrative endures. Perhaps this was the hidden legacy of the Templars, to take what they had found or what they claimed to have found and translate it into myth, to wrap the Ark in another name so that its power would outlast their fall. Imagine a secret circle of knights, their order crumbling, their leaders seized. They gather in candlelight. A chest lies before them, veiled. They know it cannot be shown, cannot be defended against kings and inquisitors. And so they choose another path. Let it become story, one whispers. Let it become song. And in the centuries that followed, the Grail shimmered through legend, never pinned down, never denied. The Ark's silence had become the Grail's voice. And so, to relics entwine, the Ark, golden, fixed, deadly in touch. The Grail, fluid, elusive, eternal in imagination. Perhaps they are different. Perhaps they are one. Perhaps the greatest secret is that we no longer know the difference. The Ark of the Covenant began in fire. A throne of gold and acacia, winged with cherubim, alive with presence. It crowned kings, shattered walls, struck men dead for touching it. Then it vanished. What followed was not an ending, but a scattering. Jerusalem remembered its absence. Ethiopia claimed its presence. The Templars whispered of it beneath the stones of the mount. Scotland's legends placed it on a battlefield. Portugal's sails carried its shadow across oceans, and Europe's poets reshaped it into a grail. The Ark did not die. It multiplied. Perhaps that is the true convergence. Not a chest hidden in one place, but a relic diffused across imagination itself. Each silence became a throne, each rumor a sanctuary. The Ark was never where people searched, it was always in the searching. Stand back and you see the pattern. In Jerusalem, a throne room without a throne. In Ethiopia, a guarded chapel closed to all eyes. In Scotland, shadow riders turning a battle. In Portugal, red crosses on sails reaching horizons unknown. In Europe, stories of a grail that could never be caught. Different lands, different shapes, the same hunger. What if this was the Ark's destiny all along? Not to remain in wood and gold, perishable and corruptible, but to become indestructible through story. Not to be carried on poles, but carried in memory. Picture it now. You walk through an old chapel. Dust hangs in the air. A shaft of light falls on carvings of angels bent over an invisible chest. You think of Axum, where a single guardian watches day and night. You think of Roslyn, where pillars echo Solomon's temple. You think of ships at La Rochelle, vanishing into mist. And you realize each place tells the same story in a different tongue. The Ark may not be in any one of them, but it is in all of them. What then is the final convergence? It is not discovery. It is not possession. It is the realization that the Ark's greatest power was never in being touched. It was in being sought. Kings craved it. Priests invoked it. Knights guarded it. Nations wove it into their crowns. Even now, you and I linger on it, centuries removed, our thoughts bent around its silence. That is its power, to live forever in longing. And so the story closes, not with a revelation, but with a whisper. The Ark may still lie beneath stone. It may still rest in Ethiopia. It may sail unseen across oceans, or it may be nowhere at all. But wherever faith endures, wherever silence commands awe, wherever a throne is felt, though not seen there, in shadow, the Ark still waits, not as gold, not as wood, but as mystery.